On the urban debate tonight, amid the ruckus over the Rafale deal, Lok Sabha passes the amended Transgender Persons Rights Bill.
सामाजिक न्याय और अधिकारिता मंत्रालय ने इस विषय पर प्रक्रियात्मक कार्रवाई करके एक विधेयक तैयार किया और वो संसद में प्रस्तुत किया गया है.
The new bill prohibits discrimination against a transgender person in areas such as education, employment and healthcare.
To consult the transgender community and to introduce a robust and comprehensive legislation for our consideration. Madam Speaker, my party is prepared to support a constructive bill.
Madam, I'm ashamed to share this information with you, but even in the police cases, there are several transgender cases where there are allegations that even police use their power to ill-treat them. So why can't we have a helpline for them?
The transgender community is not happy with the present bill. They say the bill doesn't include their demands for reservation in jobs. They also feel that the punishment for crime against transgenders should be stricter.
This country didn't give our basic rights. So without reservational rights, this bill was passed. It's a black day of the trans community.
Miro now asks, is the Transgender Persons Bill 2016 truly inclusive? And is it enough to end discrimination? More importantly, will society be able to accept transgenders and end discrimination? Let's debate.
Well, this is an important thing to talk about at prime time. Because while it's fairly easy for you and me to sit back and say, my name is Faye, I identify as she and her, there is an entire community of people in this country that we need to make room for, because prejudice, crime, violence, physical and verbal, has kept them from truly being who they are, or has kept them from truly contributing to society in the manner that they'd like to contribute. Now here's the thing, the transgender bill, which has been talked about for so long, has finally been moved in Lok Sabha. But the community says it's not enough. First of all, because you didn't take the opinions and consultation and viewpoints of the community you were regulating for. How could any straight person possibly claim to understand what the transgender community really needs? And how can we possibly assume that the straight community can decide for the transgender community? Will this bill actually serve its purpose? Joining me on the show, Rajiv Pandey, leader with the BJP, Ami Yagnik for the Congress Party. Tripti Tandon is an advocate with the Supreme Court who understands this bill really well. Mridul and Nishta in the studio with me are members of the transgender community, and I welcome both of you. Thank you for joining us. Mridul, I want to start with you. We were having a conversation before we came up, and you said that everything about this bill is wrong. Could you tell us why?
Yes. So, when the last version of the bill came, the community had asked for a lot of things. A lot was missing, a lot was wrong.
Okay.
They haven't given us anything except changing the definition.
So what's missing in this bill?
So anti-discrimination, I mean, they haven't even defined what discrimination is. That's completely missing. They were supposed to put that in. The whole point of it was to get trans people more involved in the society, right? Things should have been easier for us. Everything is a lot more confusing. For instance, they still have this clause for screening committees.
Yes.
Which is going to screen and decide whether a person is trans or not. I mean, the very idea is that people should be able to self-determine, right? Self-determination of gender is the point. How can somebody else tell me what my gender is? If I'm saying it's man, it's man.
Yes.
The begging clause has not still been removed.
What is the begging clause and why do you want it removed?
So, as per the last version of the bill, they had made it illegal to engage in begging, any kind of begging activities, and the community had responded by saying that there are two parts to it. One is that it's there's a cultural component to it especially with the Hijra community, and otherwise what else does one do? I mean, you don't let us into the schools, you don't give us jobs, what are we going to do?
Yes.
So they haven't tried to address any of it.
Won't this also lead to more harassment by law officers, police, who will just come and say, oh, were you begging? if someone was just standing at the bus stop waiting for a bus, and they would say, "Were you begging? We're just going to pick you up and just take."
Were you begging or were you soliciting? There are just two things.
There are just two options.
Yeah, there is a lot of brutality that the trans community faces.
And the paperwork that this bill involves.
Correct. So again, that is another mess out there. They have said that to change documentation, to change paperwork, they'll have a screening committee which will decide whether it can give us the certificate saying that we are trans, which is problematic in itself. How can somebody else decide whether I'm trans or not? The other thing is, if now I'm a trans man,
yes,
right? I don't want my documents to say transgender. I want them to say man.
Yes.
The documents that I had earlier, they said woman. According to this bill, now I can't get it done unless I've had surgery done. It just says surgery. Medical
what
surgery.
Is that surgery? They have not
they
specified.
Haven't defined. I mean,
and
what
who's
surgery?
To decide? They have not specified. Right. I also want to bring in Tripti Tandon. Tripti understands, the specifics. So, Tripti, obviously, one of my problems today is that Parliament is functioning so little, and even when it does function, it has passed a bill for the transgender community that makes the transgender community really unhappy. Could you explain to us where we went wrong, or where Parliament went wrong in this particular case?
I think firstly, the government really misread what the transgender community wanted. We had the Supreme Court in 2014 uphold the fundamental rights of the transgender community, and the government should have really worked with that judgment. They didn't do anything to implement that judgment for the last 4 years. Then there was a private members bill introduced in the Rajya Sabha, which literally shamed and embarrassed the government. That here is a private members bill which is being, talking about the rights of this community. And though there were some issues with that bill, it was by and large progressive, recognized rights. Now that bill got passed and the government went on this back foot, very embarrassed as to what do we do. That's when they came up with this completely flawed, nonsensical bill. And luckily, they sent it to the standing committee, which made over 55 recommendations for modifying it and making it more, purposeful. None of those recommendations have been accepted. And as my colleague just rightly pointed out, this bill is a complete mess. It takes away all the rights that the Supreme Court has afforded the community in 2014. I mean, instead of doing better, we're going to go backwards on this issue. I think it's completely unacceptable.
The bill actually goes backwards. One more voice I want to bring in is Nishtha, who's in the studio with me. Nishtha, if you could help us understand and, not getting the opinions of the people who are going to be impacted by this bill, because technically, if we look at it, nobody outside the transgender community will be impacted by this bill at all. It will not change my life in any way. So technically, we should have had a committee of transgender people who understand what needs to be done, working on actually writing this out. But that didn't happen, did it?
Absolutely. So the cisgenders tried communicating with few transgenders, maybe high-profile one, and tried to make this bill, which is very much specific to a particular sector of the transgender umbrella. But then we need to consider the trans men, the trans women, the genderqueer people, there are androgynous and many others who are a part of the transgender umbrella, but they are never mentioned anywhere. So the ground fact is that people need to speak about reality when they need to know what people are facing. Just because a few people come and raise their voice doesn't mean that that's it. They don't know what is happening really in the society. This really needs to be understood.
Well, I want to bring in Rajiv Pandey with the BJP, who's with us right now. Rajiv Pandey, it seems like the government has missed the point entirely on this bill and is also almost being tone deaf when it comes to the feedback it is receiving. Could you tell us why the government passed a bill that the transgender community is unhappy with?
What I feel that this third gender, which was defined by the Honorable Supreme Court of India, the fight of third gender has come a long way, and now people have started accepting that they exist, and discrimination against them is bad, and the government is discrimination against them is bad and illegal, and it amounts a criminal case. And now, as per this act, government has tried to criminalize that, that if anybody is doing any discrimination against third gender or transgender, which is stated in this bill, so I feel that it's a way forward.
Okay, Rajiv Pandey, okay, let's take this. No, one second. Let's take it piece by piece. One second, Rajiv Pandey, let's take it piece by piece. You said discrimination will be illegal and the government has tried to ensure that nobody discriminates against the transgender community. What is discrimination here? If I tease someone, if I don't give them a job, is that discrimination? And let's assume discrimination does take place. Who will enforce this new law? What is the punishment? Who can the to whom will the transgender person actually complain? How will that complaint be dealt with? There are no details whatsoever in the bill. So how do you hope at all to end discrimination?
I will explain. I think once another lawyer is also in the panel. You know, first act has to be passed. After the act, rules are framed under that act. You are saying if the act is passed, the 6 months to 2 years is the punishment. Then under this act, rules will be framed after this law become act. After getting clearance from both the Lok Sabha and after getting the signature of the Honorable President, then there will be a rules
I
will be framed under this act, and in that everything will be very clear about.
Right, Tripti Tandon, please go ahead. She disagrees with you, by the way, Mr. Pandey.
I disagree. I disagree entirely. This is anti-discrimination is a substantive provision which has to form part of the law, the act, and can't be delegated to the rules. The only clause that deals with discrimination simply lists out certain acts and says these acts are forbidden. Now, what happens when somebody commits that act? What are the consequences? Who do you go to? Do you go to court? Do you go to a tribunal, as is the case in another country? Or do you go to the National Council for Transgender People, which today, one provision that was amended and allowed was that they will do grievance redressal. What does that mean? With no powers and procedures enumerated, where is the person going to go to? That's one issue. The second issue is that the one right which was specifically guaranteed by the Supreme Court in Nalsa is that transgender persons are entitled to equal protection of the law. Now, a lot of the laws in the country still recognize people in the binary genders of male and female. Where does a transgender person go? This bill is absolutely silent in its relationship with existing laws or laws that are to come in the future, which retain that binary of male and female.
Go ahead, Mridul.
Since you were talking about discrimination and equal protection under the law, according to this bill itself, the maximum penalty that a person will get for sexual assault on a trans person is 2 years. 2 years. I mean, what is the maximum penalty somebody gets for sexual assault on a cis woman?
Yeah, so
why should trans women
effectively what we're saying is if someone were to rape a transgender person, we're talking about a maximum punishment of 2 years.
Maximum. Yeah.
Maximum punishment. And it's very rare that maximum punishment is actually dealt out in any law. So just that by itself is discriminatory, is the point you're making. Ami Yagnik of the Congress, do you agree?
No, Faye, I disagree. The offence under section 19, it says something else. It is not like that somebody rapes, then it will be 2 years. I don't think so, sir.
So then explain to us, what is it?
You know, Faye, you will have to go through that section 19, chapter 8. It talks about other discrimination. If somebody is raped and whatever Mridulji is saying, I think that will not fall under this act. So for that, IPC will apply.
Which IPC will apply?
I have one more response to that.
I'm sure you do.
That's the...
the rape laws are gender specific. The rape laws are gender specific, Mr. Rajiv Pandey. So which IPC will apply?
So I'm coming to that. You know, after this act, maybe IPC will have to be also amended. What I'm trying to say, Faye, that after passing of this order, this act, as far as the rape and other things are concerned, maybe IPC will have to also get amended in light of the passing of this bill.
So it's not in the act. All right.
I personally feel that until this, after passing this bill, and
yes, go ahead, please.
Right. So the other thing is, since you said that it comes under IPC, and different laws apply. This act doesn't apply to matters of sexual offence. There actually was a case not too long ago when a trans woman was raped, approached the court, and the judge, and it is actually news. I don't remember the date now. The judge said that I don't know what section to apply. I mean, you're not like I have sections for a man, a woman, and an animal. Like I don't know what section to apply in this case. Yes. So IPC by itself is not going to apply. You have to provide the framework.
I just want to bring in a view from Tripti Tandon. Tripti, very quickly, your weigh in on the sexual offence, the fact that a maximum sentence of 2 years, that by itself is discriminatory.
It's absolutely, it's treating sexual violence against transgender people as a petty offence. I mean, how demeaning is that? And let me give you an example. Just this morning, we were before the Delhi High Court with a transgender person who was subjected to sexual harassment within the meaning of Section 354 capital A of the IPC, the newly incorporated provision. Now, this was her chance, like her issue with Me Too. And the police refused to register an FIR saying you're not a woman, you're transgender. And it took 6 months, and finally we got an order from the Delhi High Court today saying that the section should apply. And that too because the section didn't really specify woman as a victim in some of the clauses. Now, for every issue, every offence, we expect transgender people to go to court and demand equal rights. Then what good is this bill? What have we done today by passing a law which has no meaning whatsoever? According to the learned friend from the BJP itself, now this will have to be amended, that will have to be amended. Why didn't you take care of this in the bill itself?
The first place. Absolutely. Ami Yagnik with the Congress party. Ami Yagnik, what is the Congress's official stand on the transgender bill as it in its current form?
Well, I think the bill was very clearly mentioned by the Congress person in the parliament that it is extremely flawed. There might be 27 amendments, but yet the bill is flawed. We start with the definition of the transgender, which is not clear. We straightway go to discuss penal sections, or the person from the BJP says that it will become an act and then it will be rules. Well, that follows later on. But there should be clarity in the bill, which is not there. That was what was pointed out, that the bill has to be deferred in order to see that these amendments, even if they are carried out by the government, I think it needs a lot of discussion on this. When you have not taken the finer points and not followed what the Honorable Supreme Court has said in 2013's writ petition, I think they have to follow at least that, so many provisions and so many directives have been given to the state and the central government. I don't think that they are finding any place in the bill, at the current bill. And so these issues were raised in the parliament, that the bill is severely flawed, should be deferred for a while. The stakeholders, I think you have to consult those people. There are so many other issues, right from clarity of the definition to whether there will be what forums. Do you have a welfare board to look after? The Supreme Court has said there should be equal rights. Who is going to decide that? Where should they go? Who will, which court will decide the issues when there is an offence committed, when there is no recognition? So all these things are very silent, and somewhere they have borrowed the definitions rather than giving it a proper thought to bring clarity in the bill. So I think the bill is completely flawed, requires to be deferred. There should be, they have talked about setting up of a national commission or a national council, but you need to have a welfare board, you need to give them a channel, because you need to provide infrastructure from courts to ingredients of the offence committed or discrimination to be defined, reservation. So these issues are not very clearly in the bill. So this was what was brought to the notice in the parliament, and that is where we stand.
Well, Mridul, I've got some interesting questions coming in from our viewers right now. Here's a question from Deep Tarkar, who says, how many points are there in this new law which are not acceptable to the transgender community people? I counted 6 when you were talking earlier, but is it safe to say all of them?
Yes.
Almost, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So here's the irony of it, viewers. A bill has been drafted and passed through Lok Sabha, at least. specifically designed for the benefit, supposedly, of the transgender community. And the transgender community is unhappy with all of it.
Yes.
And none of...
Majorly.
No, and how many members of the transgender community were consulted when this was being drawn up?
So there was this parliamentary standing committee that took recommendations, not just from trans people, but from people working with trans people, from a lot of activists and organizations. They were sent and they were incorporated. Not all of them, but a lot of them were incorporated. But then even the committee has not been properly implemented. Even the committee report has not been properly implemented in the bill.
So there was a parliamentary committee report that gave recommendations that have not been taken into consideration in this bill.
I mean, not in the spirit of it. Some words have been taken, but the spirit has completely been left out.
Yash Sharma on the phone line from Bangalore. Yash, go ahead, please.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's a sad day in our democracy, because when the sessions were happening, all of a sudden the social welfare minister is getting this bill. And this is very sad day for the entire community, because since the bill has come, we have fought saying that we are against this bill. We don't want this bill. There are many more things which has to be considered with the community. Though it was not happen in the national, there was no national consultation happened on this bill, and there were no recommendations were taken when the community members raised their voice. If you remember, on 17th December last year, we fought in Delhi Parliamentary Street saying that we oppose this bill, and this was not considered. And the third thing, very sad, that Rajiv Pandey said right now, that considering giving the identification as third gender. Then my question to Rajiv Pandey is that who is the first gender and who is the second gender in this in democratic Indian
Very well
country?
said. That's an excellent question, Yash Sharma. Rajiv Pandey, do you want to answer that question? Who's the first and the second gender that you get to put a whole community of people in as a third gender?
No, I'm saying.
Aren't we equal in the eyes of the law?
Then I think you will have to... This third gender word was used in that judgment. I was very conscious about this. That's why I was telling both the words third gender or transgender. I am not saying that men and women are first and second, you all are third gender. That was in the judgment. That word was used in the judgment. So,
okay, so Rajiv Pandey, okay, all right, let's actually talk about specifics. Let's not waste too much time on this. Let's talk about specifics. Rajiv Pandey, the transgender community has a slogan that says nothing about us without us, which means you don't make decisions about us without consulting us. Now, please tell me why the government of India did not take into consideration the recommendations given by the parliamentary committee, why the bill went through Lok Sabha anyway without consulting members of the community.
Faye, I am not aware that whether this, before making this bill, they have consulted or not. And neither you can be aware that whether any organization or whether from this community they have taken suggestions or not. But certainly this judgment, the basis of this act is the judgment passed by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. And I personally feel that still this bill will be debated in the upper house. And if any suggestion is there, and even after the making law also, several amendments takes place. So I personally feel neither I am competent nor you are competent. Finally, Parliament has to pass the law.
Yes.
If
all right, Rajiv
parliamentarians
Pandey, here's my question.
And
we
then
passed,
if somebody is finding fault with that act, you can go to the...
Yes, we passed a cow slaughter bill where there was very clear recommendations of what the punishment will be if you hurt a cow in this country. How come the same argument doesn't apply there?
I am unable to understand from where to where you are linking. This is very sad. I am not going to reply this question.
It is terribly unfortunate. I agree with you. It is very sad.
How it is connected with this? I am extremely sorry.
Okay, all right.
No, you asked this question to some other panelist. I have nothing to say.
Okay, Tripti Tandon, do you want to answer this question?
This law is, government is trying, and finally...
Tripti is the other lawyer on the panel. She'll answer. Tripti Tandon, you want to answer the question? Advocate for the Supreme Court.
I want to actually just contest, what the gentleman just said. This bill is not in accordance with the Supreme Court decision in Nalsa. It is contrary to it. The first example that comes to mind is the Supreme Court has clearly said no requirement of sex reassignment surgery for recognizing one's gender, whether as male, female or transgender. This bill today has introduced an amendment that makes it mandatory for people to undergo sex reassignment surgery, produce that medical certificate before the district magistrate, and then get their gender recertified. This is clearly contrary to the Supreme Court decision. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, the court said no discrimination, equal protection of the law, giving 6 months punishment for rape for transgender persons and life imprisonment for a cisgendered woman, clearly on the face of it discriminatory. The Supreme Court said reservation, treat them as other socially and economically backward classes. The bill is silent, doesn't say anything about reservation. How is it in line with the Supreme Court decision? It's completely deficient and violates the spirit and the letter of the Nalsa judgment, and it must be challenged if the Rajya Sabha doesn't correct it.
This is all superficially made, you know. No consideration of the transgenders actually who belong.
So let's take, because we have a couple of minutes. Let's take this for granted that the government is listening. If you had to make one change or two changes to this bill, what would you make?
Yes, so the number one would be the definition, how they would define a transgender person as. It is rubbish what they have put here in the paper. Number two, they really need to speak something about reservations, especially when a lot of political parties are coming forward, creating their own boards to decide what rights we should have. I believe we should be the one who should be given an opportunity to create our own rights, rather than the cisgenders deciding something which is some piece of shit this is produced here.
Mridul, what would you change of the bill?
So actually, in one word,
let's assume you had to make a list and the government is listening. What would you change?
There's no one thing. I will have to scrap pretty much most of it.
Okay.
Because while creating this bill, the thought has been of people coming to us. The government has been sort of thought as if people are coming to us to ask for things. Now we have to decide whether we can give or not. Everything is around that. So you have to have had surgeries, or you have to this conflation between intersex.
You have to qualify. According to this bill, you have to qualify to be a transgender.
Exactly.
You have to go say, I'm transgender here, I will prove it to you. What you're saying is, you don't want to have to prove it to anybody. No. Take my word for it.
Yes.
It should be.
And that is all there can be. I mean, what else can be? I mean, are you saying if I haven't had surgeries done, I'm not a trans man? I mean, you can't say that. It goes against the very judgment itself.
I mean, the whole argument of being transgender is that it cannot be biologically quantified.
It cannot.
You cannot prove it in any sort of hospital to any doctor or anybody else that you are transgender. It's just what you say, what you feel, right?
Yes. And one criticism of it that one has heard is that people will just come, men will come, say they are women or they're trans women, and they'll get benefits. To them, I say that you realize the kind of society we live in. You know how hard it is for a man to say I'm a woman?
Yes.
Like, it's an insult to call a man a woman, right? I mean, we live in that kind of world. Do you think somebody will just come up and say that I'm a woman, now give me this?
And according to this bill, what are these benefits?
There are no benefits. That's the point of it. I mean, there are no benefits.
It's just made and passed for the sake of doing it.
Okay. And there's a serious concern about, and I just want to read out, and for our viewers who don't understand why we're bringing this up at prime time, let me tell you, this is the data that has just come out from India Spend, and India Spend is an organization I respect and trust thoroughly. 4 out of every 10 transgender people face sexual abuse before they turn 18 years old. The abuse begins as early as the age of 5, and the most vulnerable are during the ages of 11 to 15. Violence, physical, emotional and sexual, continues beyond childhood. 44.7% of respondents of a survey reported facing incidents of violence, an average of 3 incidents per person. Emotional violence topped that list, followed by physical and then sexual violence. 28% of the people interviewed in this particular survey did not have education, and that made the violence worse, and that made them more vulnerable to crime and to violence. There are a couple of things we have to remember. For far too long, we've gotten away with treating members of our society, our own brothers and sisters, as if they were not equal. Whereas we live in our country for the last 70 years that tells us that we're all equal. There's absolutely no way that this bill will restore that equality unless members of the community this bill is meant for are consulted face to face on every single point. We can't tell the transgender community that you are no longer allowed to beg unless you make absolutely sure that every member of that community is given a job elsewhere. You can't tell the transgender community that if someone rapes you, the maximum punishment they will receive is 2 years, when rape of a woman could result in death. That is discriminatory. You cannot tell a transgender person that you have to prove that you are transgender, because the whole fundamental definition is about how one defines themselves, irrespective of the biology that one is born with. So we need to relook at this, and we need to relook at it quickly. And we make an appeal right now to the members of the Rajya Sabha, where this bill will soon arrive, and to the members of the government and the cabinet that cleared it, to please take into consideration the people for whom this bill is designed. Their opinions are really the only opinions that should count at this point. Thanks for watching.